evening. And yes, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers in the US. I don't know whether it's just a US thing today, but yes, if you're a mother, happy Mother's Day. Including my mother. It's not Mother's Day in the UK, but happy Mother's Day anyway. Because sometimes she watches the start of the stream. Yeah, sorry for the delay starting. I was packaging the Caravella to try and get it working. I realised that I hadn't added it to the list of levels to package, which is why it was working fine in the editor, but not in a packaged build. So that's just me. Me doing human error, as always. Right, let's move that out of my way, because for some reason I'm looking at myself. Click that. Right, and let's see whether or not that actually worked. So we should now be able to load the Caravella. Ignore the weirdness. So one of the things I want to do during this stream is fix these weird issues with the collisions, make it so that you can actually fly the ship, and hopefully get all the FTL working so you can actually use it for exploring properly. Fingers crossed anyway. And the first thing I noticed when playing in the editor is there was an enormous amount of lag when starting the game, and I think we've got a few actors which are looking for companions. So we've got the various cables and pipes and things, all trying to find overlaps, which is why it is struggling. If we give it a sec, it should give up whatever it's doing. Oh, yeah. Oh, almost. Yeah, I think it's all this wonky collision stuff. Right, let's abandon that. Come on, let me press escape. There we go. Right, so let's get that fixed. So to begin with, let's make sure for now, yeah, we'll block on load, so it loads more quickly in the editor. And I'll sort out these collisions. So here is our physics test that we were doing. So just as a reminder, every vessel in the game has two components associated with it. At least it does in the new regime. So we've got the sim version of the mesh, which is the mesh which is running full collisions. So that's this one, and this has a collision mesh and it can bounce around and hit stuff. And then we also have the same mesh without any collisions at all, and that's the one you can physically see out of the windows. So that's basically a proxy that's driven by this. Except not this one, because this is the physics one with better center of mass. We want this one. Yeah, so there's our mesh. So what this does is this spawns a proxy of itself there. And what that proxy does is that proxy is basically visible to other objects in space if you're not on this ship. So when you transition to being on a shuttle, then you see the proxy for the ship you were just on. We're going to have to change some of this as we move forward with adding shuttles and adding different locations in space, so that the base ship that you start the game on, so when you go to launch new vessel from the main menu, that vessel always has an ID of 0. That's the base ship that the save game is built around. So that's always going to be the primary vessel that the mission is associated with. And then everything else needs to just increment by 1 from there as we spawn them in and out. So if we construct a new shuttle in the shuttle bay, then that needs to get a new ID that's unique to itself, so that when you're on it, you see the Caravella or the Magellan out of the window where it should be in space. So we need to make sure that all that's working. So this one, collision-wise, should only be colliding with the Starship channel, which wasn't working, and this broken one that I made because we were suffering from bugs with it last time. So we were colliding with the potatoes in space in a way that we shouldn't have been. And then we've also got our spawner that we were experimenting with, and this is the thing that spawns the potatoes. And then similarly, they have the same thing where they've got a mesh which is their simulated mesh, and then they also spawn a proxy which is the visible mesh. So again, we want to make sure they're only on the Starship channel. Right, let's just see whether or not that is better. Yeah, hopefully it is. Need to work out 1, what it's colliding with, and 2, what's making it lag. Yes, Don. So the job of the Caravella, that's going a bit better. Yeah, the whole job of the Caravella was to give us a smaller vessel that we can build all the tools and systems on, and then port them across to the Magellan when they're done and polished. Because having a small ship that we can load in quickly, iterate on quickly, and build using all the same techniques and technologies as we're going to use on the Magellan, we can do it all on a much smaller scale, and test it all here first. So that's kind of the point of this ship. So it's already loading its space situation from what we see on my other save game, because I've told it to load the same save file. So the Galaxy Gen and the save loading side of things is all the same and working. So that's a good start. We already set up the electrical side of things on previous streams. Obviously we need to do a lot of work there to polish it all up, but we've got voltage, so that's something at least. Yeah, then we need to get this working, so that all works. Because I don't know how productive this is actually going to be. Yeah, so we've got some functionality. Oh, hang on, are you coming up as helm? Yeah, they are. Okay, so they're all flagged as helm. So what we need to do on tonight's stream is basically go through all the different aspects of the bridge and fix it all so it works the same as the Magellan does. So everything is all one-to-one, so that we can actually start using this properly for flying around in. Obviously, it's lacking a lot, like Windows for one, and you can't see the ring or anything. But it would be nice to just to start flying it and actually get an idea for how it handles, how it performs, and all the rest of it. We'll probably also go with the full sublight model on this as well, so that it performs and behaves properly with RCS thrusters, as opposed to just being pushed into position like we do with Magellan. The Magellan uses a fake flight model rather than actual RCS thrusters, whereas this one will be pushed by the thruster itself. I don't think there's any glass in this either. No glass there either. So yeah, still needs a lot of work. But at least the holo display is working, so that's good. And we're seeing our list of planets in range, which is good. And we seem to be in the right place. There's nothing in range there, but I think we're a bit too far away. Yeah, we need to be within 4 times the radius to do a scan, so we're not quite close enough. And I don't think this works. Yeah, so we've got no no control over any of this either, so that's all going to need fixing. That makes sense though, because we haven't actually added any of the autopilot code or anything to the actual ship itself, so we'll fix that. I think what we'll do is we'll probably transition to the version of our static mesh actor that has nailed center of mass, and build it from there. So what we'll do is we'll start porting across all the Magellan's code onto here. Ultimately, we want a base class for the ship, and in fact, to be honest, we may as well build this as the base class, so that it doesn't matter what ship we're building from this point on. We're basically creating children of that base class, so we're not having to do all the same work all over again each and every time. Yes, Danger Mouse, that's basically what I'm going to do, although I want to do it in such a way that this is very, very generic, and yeah, so that we want to set this class up so that it doesn't matter like what ship we're building, it's all inheriting from the same base class for vessel. This is a space vessel, and it needs to handle the autopilot model, it needs to handle the FTL model, it needs to handle helm inputs from the various UIs, and it needs to manage its own proxy in space. So right now the Magellan's using an old version of that, which has been kind of cobbled together over the course of years, and it doesn't include dynamic proxy handling, it doesn't include a lot of the center of mass calculations that we would need to properly do sublight thrusters, because right now, again, it's using a plugin called 60OF movement. It's a very, very old plugin. We've been using it since Unreal 4, and we used that on all of our previous projects as well. It's like super old. It must be like 10 years old at this point. But to their credit, they keep updating it for every Unreal version. But that allows you to fly something in space like it's a plane. So for things like starfighters and stuff, you'd use that for that kind of flight model. And we may still use that for atmospheric flight because it's more useful in that environment. For space flight, we don't want anything like that. We want pure input from RCS thrusters, and things like the autopilot need to work with those RCS thrusters in mind. So rather than magically just pointing the ship at the target, which is the way it works now, we want it to actually work out which thrusters it needs to fire to point the ship at the target. So it's going to be a lot more logic and math, but ultimately it's then a real simulation rather than fakery. We don't want the fakery, we want to make it all real. And this is basically this is the foundation of that. We've got a base class with a static mesh for the ship, and then we can swap out that static mesh depending on which ship we're simulating, and it will automatically work out the true center of mass based on the origin of the mesh. So the world origin of the mesh is used as the center of mass rather than the collision profile, which is what we were struggling with last time. So as a reminder, when you're using like auto-convex collisions like this, and it doesn't do a great job of it, it's kind of like the best it could do. Sadly, you can't use a custom collision mesh and have physics on at the same time. So we'll keep refining this as much as possible to make it as close to the actual ship as possible. But the problem with this is we have non-mirrored convex hulls. So when the Chaos physics engine is working out the center of mass for this vessel, obviously it prioritizes the rear end because there's a lot more geometry there, and it's going purely by geometry, not necessarily by weight. So it doesn't know how heavy the engines are. There might be something really heavy at the front, like all of our water tanks are all stored under here, so technically by mass that's going to be the heaviest part of the ship, but it doesn't know that. All it knows is there's more collision geometry here than there is there, therefore this end should be heavier. And we don't want that. We want it to use a manually specified center of mass that we predetermine, rather than letting chaos physics work it out for us, because the center of mass won't be in the middle. It's going to be off to one side somewhere, and that's just no good. When you're dealing with thruster inputs, that creates all kinds of issues. But we should be past that now, so we should be good. So that's going to be loaded as the base model, and then we can just swap the mesh out depending on which ship, and make sure we give it the proxy for that as well. Yeah, it's a great name for it. Okay. So I suppose the first thing we want to do is start bringing across the various elements from the Magellan. So if we can copy that across to here. That was me experimenting with physics, so we'll get rid of that for now. Yeah, we don't need that yet. And we don't need that. So we'll start from a blank plate and work up from there. So we want to grab our Magellan flight model, which is where? Or, to be honest, we could do it the other way around. Because I did actually build this originally as a generic class. But I'm reluctant, to be honest, to change this because it's going to break the Magellan, which we don't want to do. So it's better if we just build a new one. Yeah, so ultimately we're going to delete this because we don't need that anymore. And the only thing we need on here is just a ship mesh for the physics handling. Yeah, then all the rest of it can just get copied over. Yes, Anasi, it can essentially reverse just as quickly as it can accelerate forwards. Yes, ultimately that's what we are doing, but we've had to force it that way because by default the chaos physics doesn't do it like that. It tries to work it out for you and does a terrible job of it. So what we can do is, I think we need to do that from here. So if you set a center of mass, then the center of mass that you are setting here is an offset. It's not the actual center of mass. So what you need to do is you need to get the center of mass and then work out where your origin is, and then you basically invert that. In this case, the origin's already at 0, 0, 0. So you can do it where you times each one by -1. Where basically you're offsetting the center of mass by the inversion of the actual center of mass. So if the center of mass is slightly off to the right, what you're doing is you're moving it back to the middle again by offsetting it with this. So it means that the center of mass is always right in the middle where you want it to be, and you have to do that on tick because every time chaos physics looks at the collision volume, it's constantly recalculating the center of mass. So the center of mass is constantly drifting all the time. In fact, it kind of wobbles around like this because it's constantly looking at the collision volume, which isn't changing. I don't know why it's moving around because the collision volume is set, but it does. The center of mass moves around. So we're constantly having to put the center of mass back in the middle just to make sure that it rotates smoothly on its axis. Yeah, if it was a physics mesh, then yeah. Right. So I think what we'll do is we'll trim this down to be as small and as lightweight as we can possibly make it by deleting all the chaff. So we definitely need our reference to the game state because we're doing that. We're using that for our ship state. So this is something that we have to maintain. Again, in previous tests, we were using index 1 for the Caravella, but we'll proceed with the Caravella being index 0 as well, because it's the primary ship of the session, which will just help with keeping everything organized. So the autopilot and FTL timers can stay where they are. That was a test I was doing that was not needed. Okay, I think what we'll do is if we're running the tutorial, I think we'll create a save game that is in a certain place so that we can run the tutorial, which means we don't actually need to position the ship anywhere on here, because that's the kind of like I guess duct tape fix that we've put onto it, so that if we're not loading a save game and we're running a tutorial, then manually position the ship somewhere, which is definitely a duct tape fix. So we don't want to do that. So we want to remove everything which is not absolutely critical. Okay. So I would also question the need to load the game from the slot, because we should already have this specified on the player controller. So not player controller, game state, because when we load the game, which we're already on, we're already doing load save from slot, and we're already setting those individual variables from the save game. So doing that again here is kind of redundant. We just need to make sure we gate that behind our save loaded. So we're broadcasting save loaded here, so we can use this to gate this on that. So we already are, look, so we don't even need to do it there. Yeah, so we'll replace that with our reference to game state. In fact, we don't even need to do that. We can even use our macro. Although, that said, the macro is actually getting it from game state. Yeah, that is the same one. No, we are good. We can use that. So if we get don't need any of that. We can just do that. That makes it simpler. So we don't need that either. Which means we don't need that. Deleting code is my favorite thing. Because if you're deleting stuff, then you're optimizing. Right, so we're loading it on a new game. We're loading it when continuing. We're loading it if you're hosting there. You're loading it there, and you're not loading it on those two. Although actually no, we will load it on tutorial, because we'll set up a static save game if we're on the tutorial, just so it's got some data to start with. Otherwise it will load with blank settings. Okay, so that's cut out a bunch of nonsense. Okay, so we're setting all of our variables here and positioning the ship in local space. We're then deciding whether or not FTL is active and whether or not the autopilot's active. And again, the autopilot relies on the 60OF plugin and the features of that plugin to point the mesh at the thing, basically at the vector you want to be looking at. So all it's doing is it's just pointing the ship towards a given vector in space. Simple enough, but we want it to be firing RCS thrusters. So the long term is getting rid of this. So we'll get rid of this for the Caravella once we have the math to do that. Okay, so that's that simplified. And of course, once all this is done, I think, yeah, that should fire next anyway. So basically, we don't want to start broadcasting our ship state to the player controller, because that's where that goes, until we've set our variables from the save game. So we configure the ship from the save game, then we start broadcasting it out. And then these are just the responses from the helm controls. That is, yeah, that's how we create a list of local planets, so that we've got an obstacle map. So basically we just give it a list of all of the planets in the system along with their radii, work out which one's closest, and then we can use that to steer the ship around that object. That's our nav target stuff. That's how we update the website. That's just making sure we've got some electric for the FTL, and that's actually our helmet inputs themselves. So ideally these two need to be combined into one thing. This is partly why we had a bug recently where when you pressed the up arrow on the keyboard it teleported your ship to the destination, because our debug teleport here was on channel 20 and pressing the up arrow was firing channel 20, but we separated these out because obviously it would be a long list of inputs otherwise. So you've got the inputs for the actual thrusters, but then you've got other inputs for other things. Now in an ideal world they'd all be managed all at once, so we might go ahead and do that, because to be honest we can merge this and this into one collapsed graph, which might make life a little bit easier. Yeah, and that's just our clear inputs. I can make that a macro. That gets that off the graph as well. And then, yeah, there's all this stuff, which is just state setting. And then updating the website. So, yeah. So there's not a lot of chaff left on this. It's all needed for something or other, but I think I can condense it down a little bit. I suppose the easiest one is just to delete that, and then if we collapse that, handle helm inputs input. And then we want that and that. Yeah, and then we want basically all of that in there. That's fine. Okay, so we've got basically all the way up to 20 that we need to add to this now. And that's just a very simple check to make sure we've got power. Okay, and then we need to basically move all this across as well. So that was on 20, so need to not forget that. Okay, so 16 is that one. 17 is that one. And 18 is that one. Now we don't need that. And where is that coming from? Nowhere. Let's just check that it's not being fired from another blueprint. That slurping sound you can hear is not me, by the way. It's the cat drinking from the fish tank. I would pick him up and show you, but he's a miserable old man, and he'll scratch my face. He managed to get my daughter in the nose yesterday, and it just would not stop bleeding. You want to come over here, Garth, and say hello to everybody? No. He's being shy. Yeah, I've never met a more miserable cat. Like, he'll swipe at you just for walking past him. Okay, yeah, so I'm pretty confident that's not used anywhere else. And then that one there, we will turn that into a macro rather than having it lingering on the event graph. Okay. Right, so that's all of our helm inputs all handled in one place. I don't think there's anything I need to adjust here specifically. That all seems fine. Great, that's tidied that up a bit. Right, and then that's just gonna have to linger for now because I need a better process for the startup and shutdown of the FTL drive, because a lot of the effects are kind of linked to this, so that when you load up a game, if the FTL drive is off already, then you get the drive disengaging sound and rumble happen when you enter the game, which of course is not ideal because the drive shouldn't be running in the first place. So I need to go over this and kind of smooth it off and make sure that the audible and visible effect do not fire unless you're actually activating it there and then. That should be everything. I don't think this is, yeah, it's not even needed now because it's now an enum. Okay, and then for good measure we shall move that down to there. And save. Okay, so those are all in use. Those are in use. Make sure that's actually being called. Yes, it is. As well, make sure there are no lingering variables that are no longer being used. Yep, so they can go. Right, so all the variables in use, all the functions are in use, and the graph is cleaned up. So this is about as clean as we can make this for now. So I guess the next step is if we take this one, we need to port across all of the various macros and things, I suppose we also need to copy across 60OF for now, just so that it's flyable before we add the thrusters. Oh, which of course we can't do. So, right, yeah, so there's one small hiccup in this. In order for the 60OF plugin to work, the actor must be a pawn. It can't just be a generic actor, which is one of the improvements of moving to just a static mesh actor, because we don't need to load all of the pawn stuff that would normally be used for a character. It's a bunch of inherited stuff that we don't need in this actor that's just going to be redundant. So we're taking it a step back, just making it a U actor. Which means all of the stuff that use 60OF, like the autopilots, will not work on the new one. So I think what we'll do is we'll create a child class of this, or even better, we'll just use this for the Caravella. Which means we need to give it the ability to change its ship mesh. Not that that ultimately matters right now. Although that said, the origin point of this would be different. So one of the other considerations with this is that the origin point of the mesh obviously moves your perspective on space up or down depending on where the origin is. So on the Magellan, the origin point of the mesh and the ship and everything is in the center of the bridge, because when I started building it, certainly to begin with, it was largely a circular shaped vessel, so we didn't have its elongated length that we have now. But also that's where I started building it. I started building from the bridge, so the bridge is the world origin. So of course I've built all the ship underneath, which means the origin isn't the center of the mass for the vessel itself. So the center of mass is obviously like down on like D deck or E deck somewhere, because that's where the middle of the ship is. So the Magellan's perspective on space needs to be moved by those many units, because we're offsetting from where the actual center of mass is. With the Caravella, we've thought ahead of ourselves and actually fixed that, so that the static ship is built around its center of mass, and as such the simulated version of the ship, its origin point is also the correct center of mass. So for the Caravella that's not a problem, but for the Magellan it is. So we just need to make sure that by swapping the mesh out we're not messing with anything. Yeah, because ultimately we're not offsetting anything here, because the Magellan rotates around its bridge. So when we do the physics version of it, we're going to have to make sure that the physics mesh is going to have its origin point in the geometric center of the ship, so that it's properly balanced with its RCS thrusters. But then we have to update the offset out the windows by however far that point is from the bridge. So it's going to be like 40, 50, no, not that far actually. 5 to 10 meters probably, give or take. Which may not sound like much, but if you're like nose to nose with another ship, if that origin point is offset by say 10 meters, then you won't actually be nose to nose, you'll be like this. So the other ship's up here, even though physics wise they're nose to nose. So the two physics meshes are colliding nose to nose, but what you see out the window is offset by 10 meters. So we need to make sure that all of the offsets line up so that you are actually properly nose to nose. That's where things get complicated. Right, so all that having been said, let's just give this one the ability to have any static mesh as its input. So if we grab that and then we do set static mesh, and then we will parameterize that and just say ship sim mesh, because it's the sim mesh we're dealing with here, not the visible one. And we'll just make that instance editable. Okay. Now at the moment, we've got the Magellan test sim version. So we will make that our default so that we don't break the Magellan. It will just use the one that's already there. But on the Caravella, it means that we can use that instead. The flight model will be fully Newtonian, although only fully Newtonian from the perspective of the ship, other ships, space stations, and things that you'll be bumping into in space. It won't have a fully Newtonian model when it comes to orbital mechanics, so it's not going to be curable. You won't need to actually do orbital maneuvers and all that sort of thing. It just means that in a zero-G environment, it doesn't matter what direction you're thrusting in. You'll have to provide an equal and opposite thrust to stop going in that direction. And if you start the ship spinning, it will just continue to spin forever. Although we will have a helper mode on the helm to zero out rotation. So basically, we'll have like an I'm stuck button where it will fire the thrusters opposite to the way they're going, so the ship will actually stop rotating and stop moving. So it's kind of like a panic button that will stop the ship. Because not everyone's going to want to have a fully Newtonian model at all times. Not yet, Nectus, or no. So we got the Magellan, which is the big one. She's like the 3 to 400 meter one, 3 to 400 meters, yeah, about that. She's that big, so she's a huge ship. The Caravella is about the size of one of the Magellan's engine pods, so not quite so big at all. And again, the Caravella is supposed to be a small, fast scout ship that we're using as our test bed for all the sublight tech. So there is only 2 ships at the moment that we're building. Okay, so what I'm going to do is remove the ship that we currently have for the Caravella. What did I call it? Physics test, that one. So this is the thing with all the squares over it, which we were using for simulating our RCS thrusters. So that can go for a minute. And in its place, we will put our generic flyable ship class. That one. Okay, so that's that needs to be there. So you can see that the world origin for the Caravella is right in the middle of this staircase, because that's where the the center of the ship is. So this spiral staircase is the middle of the ship. And will continue to be, because I need to, I'm going to put another hull segment in here just to move everything forward a bit, so it will continue to be approximately in the middle. But we'll make that our center of mass. Okay, so everything on here now needs to speak to that ship so that it knows where things are. So the helm, can't remember how I connected them together now. So it's that one. I think, to be honest, it does handle it on its own. Yeah, so manage the button presses there. It goes through there. Yeah, so it shouldn't need to know what ship it's on, and this is part of making this generic, so that things like the holo display work on any vessel, and things like the sensors panel work on any vessel. They're not tied specifically to the Magellan or specifically to the Caravella. We want to be able to, as we move forward, especially with like the 12 backer ships we need to make, we need to be able to do the bare bones structure for the ship, throw in the existing classes for things like the autopilot and FTL, and just have them work. We don't want to spend time manually tweaking things for every ship that we add. They need to be generic classes that we can just extend from. So on that note, let's just see whether or not those helm inputs are received. The Caravella will be quicker than the Magellan, so it's going to be smaller and more nimble. Yeah, that didn't lag at all when I loaded in, so that means that it was that physics mesh that was causing all that lag. I can give you a quick run through of the ship if you want one. It's been a while since we looked at it. I start at the top. Right, so do we have helm control? Yes, we do. Okay, so because we're using the same underlying actor that the Magellan is using, we can control the ship no differently. And if we kick them out of the chair, yeah, there we go. We've also got keyboard control over the ship as well, which is good. Do we have FTL? Oh, yes we do. Stop. I think we're lacking the effects layer, so I need to add that. So I need to add the ring and everything to it so that we can actually see it flying properly. Hey Jim. Yes, so everything seems to be working. I need to add some physics lag on the controls, because it's difficult because we're moving space around the ship. On the spring arm for the camera, obviously when the camera's moving, it's not attached to the ship in any way, because the ship isn't moving. So we can't have like a spring arm lag on the camera because the camera's just stationary. So we're going to have to fake that somehow so that when you add inputs to the ship, the camera kind of bends a bit. So it bends up when you're going that way, and if we go that way, the camera bends down a bit, and bends up a bit, and bends down a bit, just to make the flight feel a bit more less like the camera's just stuck in place like this, because this doesn't feel too great. It needs a bit more movement to it, so the ship's not quite so rigid. But yeah, we shall fix those problems as we come across them. But we can fly, so that's a good start. Can we go somewhere else, I wonder? Let's go there. Okay, yeah, so we are definitely going. Again, we've got no FTL effect going on out the window because we haven't added it. But as we get up to speed, you can see the stars are moving. Actually, I wonder what it would look like without the effect on it. Hold your breath. Okay. Smells like hydrogen. While we're parked in front of a star, I will give you a very, very quick tour of what the Caravella is going to consist of. So, this is deck 1, and we will have a conference room behind the bridge. So we need to extend this module forwards, basically. So we've got room for a bit more space here, because the issue is where we've got the stairwell. And we can't make the stairwell any narrower than it is, because then you're going to struggle with NPCs walking past each other and that sort of thing. So we want to keep the stairwell really no thinner than this, but it creates this really awkward entry point into the bridge. It doesn't feel comfortable at all. But if we extend the space between the bridge and the stairwell, we can build a conference room in there, we can have a much nicer entrance, and generally just make that better. And at the back here, we'll have a couple of science labs. So we were going to kind of squeeze in a conference room at the back, but if we're doing a conference room by the bridge, then all of this can just be science space, because ultimately that's kind of the point of this ship. It's a science scout. And then down here, this is going to be the medical facility. Again, there's going to be more room forward of the stairs, so we can potentially just have the medical facility on one side and not the other. But right now, it was planned to span the corridor. Over here, we have some crew quarters and some other crew quarters, and then at the front of the ship, we've got the captain and the XO's quarters. So there's the captain's bathroom, captain's bedroom, captain's lounge and kitchen area, and the XO has the mirror of that on their side. There's going to be a lift there, and stairs down there. I'll come back to those. And then on this side, we've got some crew quarters there, and also some crew quarters there. May as well go down these stairs. So at the very front of the ship, we've got the kind of kitchen area this side, a utility area here and here. They're going to have things like 3D printers in them. We've got our lounge / bar at the front. Again, this needs extending forward as well because there just isn't enough room for it to fit comfortably. And the idea was that we'd have a bar up the top here. So it's like a bar across the back, some tables and things, and have a bunch of windows around the front, which kind of look good. And the nice thing, I think, with this is because the bar is kind of a balcony across the top, or a mezzanine, as it were, and because the windows are going to wrap around to down here somewhere, and then we'll have a little planter going around in front of the windows. From there, it's going to look like a bit like an infinity pool. So from the front of the mezzanine, looking down, you won't see the stuff underneath. You'll just look down and see space. So that could be quite cool. Okay, and then further on this deck, you've got more crew quarters all the way along. These are all crew quarters. Now, at the back here, on one side, this is the engineering side, and we'll change the visual style to make it more engineering-y. That'll be the engineering office, and this is the entrance into engineering itself, where you've got the reactor, and then downstairs you've got all the tanks and things. They are not going to be that small. And then you've got the cargo bay and everything behind there. These are going to be the stairs down into the engine pods on both sides, and you'll also have up the top here, again, the upper engineering level. You'll have engineering rooms either side for things like water recycling, etc, etc, etc. You've got engineering spaces down the side of the ship, and this goes down just behind everything, so a lot of the conduits and pipes and things will be running down these lateral maintenance tunnels down the sides, and lots of the storage stuff will be in there. And then upstairs from that, you've got the main battery room at the back here, and then you've got what will be stairs going up here into the engine pods. So all this is going to be a staircase going up through there, and the same on the other side. So you can access all 4 of the engine pods from the engineering section. And this will be an engineering lift going up here. So if you've got any like heavy components and things that need carrying, there will be a lift running up there. A cargo lift, basically. Okay, and then after all that, you've got the shuttle bay. It's not big, and I'd like to make it bigger. I mean, the shuttle bay itself is big enough. It's just the entrance at the back is just too... The doors are too tight, essentially. Make sure I don't fall off. So this is the entrance to the shuttle bay. Yeah, and it's too much of a tight entrance, so I need to do something about that. This side will be a secure door that will only be accessible for engineering staff, because this is essentially the engineering side of the ship. This side, this is the passenger side, so this side will be free for traversal, and that's just a spare room that I don't know what to do with yet. And then downstairs at the bottom of the ship, we've got a couple of spare crew quarters at the bottom, if that's what we use them for. And then we've got what will be the hydroponics down the bottom here, and all the way through there as well. So this whole area will be all dedicated to the hydroponics. And on the other side of that bulkhead, and is all the water storage tanks. So we'll make sure that they're visible through that wall. So the whole front of the ship is basically just big water storage tanks. And the lift is going to be made of smart glass, so it's going to be like a virtual aquarium that goes all the way up. So that should be quite cool. Obviously that's just a placeholder, just as a test. But yeah, the idea is this whole thing is a simulated fish tank going all the way up, with fishies swimming around, and obviously that's just projected on the glass. It's not a real fish tank. But that's it. That's the entirety of the Caravella. She's not a big ship. She's just a corporate scout ship. So it just needs space for the crew, space to conduct science, engineering space, and honking great big engines. Yes, there will not be a brig on this ship because, again, this is just literally just a commercial ship managed by a corporation. If someone is being brigged, then they'll just be restricted to quarters. Sawbones, yeah, the area we have down here, which is reserved for sickbay right now, given that we are extending the ship by one whole segment this way, so here means it's also extended here, which means we're going to have about this much room extra downstairs, which is more than big enough for a small gym. So we can definitely squeeze that in, because we'll probably make sickbay 2 segments long rather than being across the corridor. Because I was never happy with the fact that it had a corridor running through the middle of it, and that's kind of the only way we could fit it in. But yes, by extending it, it means we can make just a long, thin sickbay on one side, which means the other side can be a gym and some other stuff. Yeah, so there's a few more bits we need to squeeze in yet, and this is one of the things we were talking about back when we were building this, is that the size of the vessel is very much determined by what the vessel actually needs for long-term occupation in space. Like, I wanted, rather naively, to make something about the size of the Millennium Falcon or Firefly, kind of that kind of size vessel. But once you actually start adding in the spaces you need, the engineering spaces, the science labs, the hydroponics, all the crew quarters, all those rooms are taking up volume. So the ship's getting bigger and bigger and bigger just to fit all that stuff in. And then of course the bigger the ship's getting, kind of the more crew you start needing to manage all these areas. So then you need even more crew quarters. So like the ship is just growing and growing and growing. I don't think it's going to get much bigger now, but it's interesting. It's interesting that there's a lower limit on how small the ship can be in order for it to be able to do its mission profile, whilst fitting everything in nicely. Why would we need a brig? Again, it's a corporate vessel. No office I've ever worked in has had a prison cell. I like Firefly's crew quarters though. I like the way they kind of go off that central corridor. Yeah, we'll just have to have a particular crew quarters that's kind of reserved for brig players. Actually, I can think of just the one. We've got down the bottom here, we've got these 2 spare crew quarters. There's no reason why one of these couldn't be used as a brig. Oh yeah, good point, Anassi. Yeah, so the fuel scoop and associated refinery stuff is under the floor here, so that it will have an underslung fuel scoop underneath the ship. So under here underneath there's going to be a fuel scoop. But that's going to be under the floor here, so we'll have all the fuel tanks and things probably extend below the floor, and we'll have this floor area open with probably a gantry going around it, because on the other side of this wall is all those is the crew quarters, the stairwell, and everything else. So we are limited to space, but yeah, if we open the floor, then you'll be able to see down and see the fuel harvesting hardware and all the tanks that kind of store it before it gets routed into the main tanks. Yeah, the corporation does exist. They're called Lunara. So Lunara Industries are based on the moon. It's named after their founder, Lara, who is without going into the lore behind the company too much, basically they're an Italian luxury shipbuilder. They started off earning their original wealth by mining the moon and basically selling commodities to other industries that are moving to the moon. And then they realized that there's a lot of money to be made in orbital shipyards. So they ended up making an orbital shipyard and ended up making ships for the luxury market. Lunara were a contractor on the Magellan, which is why the Magellan has that kind of luxury styling to it, because the Lunara Corporation were responsible for a lot of the internal design on the Magellan, sort of the look and the feel of the thing. So the Caravella is going to be a slightly more upper class version of the Magellan, slightly more yachtish in terms of its stylings. It's a really kind of high-end look and feel. And of course, the only reason that they have the FTL tech is because they worked on the Magellan and managed to get the plans for the FTL drive. So they backwards engineered it and made their own version, much smaller, of course. But their whole MO is get out there. They're faster than anything else out there. They can get in, exploit a resource, and get out. They're not designed to be a combat ship. They're a scout/espionage vessel. Ah, thank you, Claire. Yeah, Claire just linked the wiki entry for it. But yeah, we like the idea that the Lunara Corporation are ultimately a humanitarian corporation. The current CEO isn't necessarily evil per se. They still want the best for humanity, but they recognize that there are resources out there to be exploited, and they're willing to bend the rules, i.e. corporate espionage, in order to be the first one to find it and to build new ships using discovered and back-engineered alien technology before anyone else does. So they're wanting to be basically the first movers on the market when it comes to building better ships. That's why they're out there doing what they do. And in their history, there's kind of rumors that are never confirmed that they may have had Italian mob dealings back in the day, and there's like some of their family money is back from mob stuff, Italian mob stuff, but obviously none of it's ever been confirmed. Just rumors and hearsay. But yeah, hopefully it's going to make them an interesting corporation to deal with. Like, they're not like full out evil like Weyland-Yutani, but they're walking the line. Okay, anyway, so we have a ship. It flies. We can't see any effects though, so let's add that. So we need to add warp bubble. Let's get that on there. Again, I don't think this is tied to any particular ship now. Yeah, we've got it hooked up to the macro, so we should be good in that regard. So this should handle the actual effect out the window, the shaking of the ship, the audio response, and all of that. Oh, thanks, Sockbox. I enjoy making them. Oh, I need to move the spawn point back up to the bridge. I forgot to do that. Okay, there we go. We've got some effects going. By planets. Okay, so we've got no labels going on. I'm assuming they are actually working. Or do we have no voltage for that? Because as odd as it might sound, the live Starfield does actually have an electrical feed. Ultimately, that's the labels you see in space. Right, let's take the same power supply we're using for these ones. So we put that on cable 1. Obviously, a lot of the stuff on the Caravella is still using these test power sources, so they're just providing fake power essentially. So until we've got all the cabling actually routed properly, we'll keep using the fake power, and then we'll slowly replace all of that with the actual power as we go through and start cabling it up properly. Live Starfield. Right, you can have cable 1, and so can you. Okay, so that should give us our space labels back, but and again I say but, the labels are visible or hidden depending on whether or not you're on the bridge. But of course, the bridge of the Caravella is in a very different place to the bridge of the Magellan. So right now, in the middle of the ship, we should be within range to see labels if there are any. But not if we go over here. So if we turn that on, we should see them here. Yeah, there we go. So we've got labels there, and as we go forward it disappears because we're now outside of the designated draw range. Obviously these are screen space labels, which is why they're the right way up and everything. And they're supposed to be, like in the lore, they're projected on the glass. So the glass of the windows is like smart glass, which is allowing the drawing of labels and things on it. But that would work from everywhere if we didn't restrict where you could see it from. So we need to change the origin point to the middle of the bridge. and have it so that if you're outside of this door, then we don't get labels, basically. It's not a brilliant solution, but it's the best we can do for now. Ideally, it'd be lovely if they were drawn on the glass properly, but to draw labels that behave in a 3D manner on flat, well, not even flat glass, it's curved glass at that. So building that into a shader would be all kinds of nightmarish. Now the issue with this is that those labels, they are hard coded. So where's our visibility check? Right, player too far. That's the check we're doing. Right, so if we are 1200 centimeters from the world origin, then the players stop seeing the labels. Or if we're too low. So what we need to do is we need to have these values be dynamic based on our center of the bridge location. So there is one way we could do this. We can add the ship name or the ship class to our ship state file, so we always know what class we're on. We can do that. We could probably get level. Is it get active level? Hang on. Get active level. Get current level. Yeah. So we could get our current level name, which should return the persistent level as opposed to our sub level, and we can use that because if we can we do a we can. No, we can't. It'd be nice if we could select on string, because then we can just literally do a select on these vectors and drive it with our string. Maybe we can always do a switch on string and then set the values that way. Because what we can do here this is kind of hard coding it, and we'd have to do this for every single ship we do. So we'd have to just keep adding vessel names, which is all right as a bodge, but maybe not as a permanent solution. We could put a collision plane on the bridge, so we can detect whether the player's on the bridge. That's one way we could do it. So, and we hold that on the player character. So we would get our player character and then just check for a flag. Are we on the bridge? We can switch on that rather than doing this. Basically, if they're on the bridge, then we can show the labels. If they're not, then we don't. And then we don't need to manually specify offsets for each and every ship. As always with programming, there's a million different ways you can accomplish the same thing, but only one of those ways is the best way. I mean, this would work for now. So I'm a big fan of the SpaceX way of doing things, and it's kind of fitting that I'm wearing a SpaceX shirt today. But like, I love the philosophy of the best part is no part, the best process is no process, and if you're not adding things back in, then you're not deleting enough stuff. And I love that as a concept because it really helps you drive optimization and efficiency and that whole notion of failing forwards. So like everything I do is kind of driven by that philosophy. So, you know, when it comes to programming problems like this, when there's various different ways of accomplishing the same thing, you need to look at those different ways and think, you know, which one of those involves the least amount of moving parts. You know, that's the most efficient approach. So going with something like this, we are simply checking which level we're on and then assuming values from there. That works. There's no moving parts involved. If we were to put some kind of collision box on the bridge, then all of a sudden we've now added complexity to our bridge, because there's now a collision volume which could potentially block mouse interaction. It could block visibility in some cases. All of a sudden we were adding complication to the bridge environment by surrounding it with a collision box. So that kind of violates the rule of like the best part is no part. This requires no additional part. So this is kind of the winning solution right now. As I said, it does require manual effort because we're going to have to specify those parameters per ship. And if we have 50 ships in the future, then we've got 50 entries on here. So the kind of the positives and negatives may outweigh one another the more ships we have. And or you could do it purely by math. Like, is the player a certain distance from a certain point? But then we also then need to flag again which ship we're on. So yeah, I think whatever which way I think about it, this is probably the most efficient way of doing it for now, at least. So we would need then to make, I guess we do a new vector on here and call that bridge center. Yeah, the issue with a trigger area is that is essentially a collision box. So it's a box on the bridge that encompasses the entire bridge that is going to be intercepting things like line traces. So any raycast you do is going to be, you have to explicitly ignore the box. So rather than the box just not being there, you're having to actually, you know, actively ignore it. When you're firing an interaction trace from a widget interaction component, that widget interaction has to explicitly ignore the thing that you added. By not having it there at all, you are removing the chance for something to go wrong. There are many occasions actually where the widget interaction gets blocked by things. Even though it's tracing on the visibility channel, sometimes things just block it in the most annoying way possible. So yeah, the best part is no part. Oh, I couldn't disagree more, Jason. I think you only need to look at how SpaceX have completely dominated the launch market to know just how much their approach is succeeding. I mean, they've achieved more than any country, any space agency, anywhere ever has done in all of history. They've launched more mass to orbit than every single country on Earth combined. So yeah, I think their success speaks for itself. Okay, so on the Magellan, we can leave that zeroed out. On the Caravella, however, we need to offset that to the middle of the bridge. So SpaceX are privately funded. They don't use tax dollars. Cube, that'll do. Looks about right, doesn't it? Minus 1400. So minus 1400, and we'll call that I guess if we go at ground level. Yeah, the thing is we need to keep the origin point in the center of mass here, otherwise the center of mass for physics gets messed up. Yeah, but the Starship program is completely, it's not funded by the government at all. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, Starship is entirely self-funded by SpaceX. Other than that one NASA contract that they did for the landing system, which is peanuts compared to how much NASA gave other companies for the same contract. Yeah, they are all self-funded. Yeah, but not Starship. So the funding SpaceX are getting are Falcon 9. So things like the ISS resupply missions, that's all the Falcon 9. The Starship program specifically, as far as I'm aware, is all self-funded. Oh, okay, I'll have to have a look at that then. Admittedly, I've not been keeping up on the past year or so. The problem with the NASA way is that NASA is all cost plus contracts that take twice as long and cost twice as much. I mean, just look at the latest, like the Artemis rocket. What's it called? Can't even remember now. It was such a waste of money and time. I've completely forgotten what it was called. No, I can't remember. The thing that uses recycled shuttle parts, but completely disposable rocket that is not reusable in any way. It's just not the way forward. That's it. SLS, yeah. SLS, the giant waste of money pit. I mean, surely that is not the way to go. Minus 1400, and we'll call it 325. But yeah, all that aside, I still think the principle is sound. If forgetting who said it or who they are or why, or who you might have a problem with or not, that the sheer concept of the best part is no part is logically sound. It's a great engineering principle because it drives efficiency. I think we will. So if the act location, so we want to know whether that, if that Z is lower than that Z minus 50. So rather than just generically minus 50, it's that minus 50. Yeah, and then 1200's a bit generous, so let's say, what are we there? If we do it to there, so we don't suddenly have the labels vanish on us or appear too suddenly. So that's 400 there. That's about right, actually. So it's probably close enough that we can leave the default value. We can always drive this value here by ship if we need to as well. So that's the live star field. We also need, where are we? We also need the labels for the star system itself as well, because it will be doing the same thing. So similar thing here. So again, on the construction script, we will just copy exactly what we did for the other one. And the nice thing is, you can see that it's already detecting that we're on the correct level. So that's a good sign. Let's give this a whirl. So the labels should now be visible on the bridge, but not if you walk out into the stairwell. Helps if I turn the labels on. Great, there we go. So we can see the labels from the bridge, and if we come out here, we shouldn't see any at all. Yeah, there we go. So that would have had labels on. We'll probably see them if we're standing in the doorway. Yeah, so there's our sensor target. There's a couple of labels there, and as soon as we get far enough away from the bridge, they turn off. I think we definitely need to limit it to like there, maybe, because that's a bit too far, because what we don't want is the labels to suddenly appear as you're coming up the stairs, because that would look weird. It is height driven, so it should be okay height wise. It's just about finding that point of balance where they appear when you want them, but they don't linger so long as to appear when you don't want them. But then again, you don't want the pop in too soon either. Okay, so the question now is, can we target a star like so and navigate to it? No is the answer. Ah, I know why. It's because we don't have a task manager on the bridge. We've got some other servers down here. What level's that on? So that's on Caravella. That's also on Caravella. Do we not have... I thought I'd put the Galaxy Gen one on its own like space stuff level, but I guess not. Okay, so we'll add our server for that. Yeah, I didn't get it until you said it either. Yeah, except your solution whelper doesn't work. So if we have a working solution for labels that stay upright and render on Windows, then yeah, then all good. But we can't use custom channels for them because it breaks the stars. But I do have another idea up my sleeve, so we shall try that at some point. Right, let's stick our task manager on there. Hey, doggo. Okay, we have our floaty box. Now again, I've been trying to design these things so that you can just drop them into a level and they'll just work. That's the plan anyway. I may as well fix these chairs while we're at it and make sure they're assigned to the right department. So NPC station is comms and oops, sensors. Command. Did I actually make that? I don't think I even actually made that the proper chair type, which won't help. I think I may have made them actually helm chairs, which is no good. Right, let's make sure we swap those with the correct class. So comms, so we want to replace with that one. Why did you go up in the air? I'll sort the heights out after. Sensors. no idea why it's going in the air. That's just annoying. So that one is captain. And XO. And one thing that we'll probably do on this particular bridge is we will dual station some of these. So rather than having a separate science and a separate comms person, might just have one seat here, which deals with both. And the same over here for tactical. We'll have tactical also have the defense panel as well. So we don't have quite as many people on the bridge as what the Magellan's got. So then we won't need like a separate engineering console, maybe. We could always use the side there for that, but we'll see. We shall see. Right, that should be enough people for now anyway, so let's make sure that's science sensors. Command captain, command XO. Leave that one where it is, and that one is correctly the helm. Must move the spawn point. Nope, gone down too far. I put the spawn point in the engineering section because we were busy working on engineering. But now we're doing bridge stuff. I need to move it back up here again. Right, let's try this from over here. So we've got the right radio menu up, so we want the long range sensors. Thank you, they did that, that's good. We'll pick a star, and then we'll say navigate to command target. Hurrah! Good job, pat on the head. Actually, I can do it with the hand, can't I? Good job, pat on the head. Let's see whether or not we draw a breadcrumb trail or not. That would be interesting. I'm also conscious of the fact we've got no labels. Oh, I know why. So, okay, so another thing with having the holo display on the center of this bridge as opposed to the Magellan's bridge is that, again, this bridge is 1400 centimeters away from the other one, and we are measuring view distance from the center of the bridge. And what we want to do moving forward is measure the view distance from the center of the display so that we can move the holo display anywhere and also make it bigger or smaller in terms of how much information is displayed all at once without affecting the draw range. So if we increase the radius of the display without increasing the zoom amount, then we should make the display bigger and show more stuff without changing the scale. And then the fall off that draws the edge of the holo display should scale with that. just about to arrive at our destination. I'm assuming the breadcrumb trail is suffering from the same problem, that it's managing its visibility based on the holo display thinking that it's there rather than where it is. I do like the idea of the holo display being surrounded by a railing on this, especially because we can mount a control panel to it for zooming and rotating and stuff, which would be nice. But I think that's it's just a nice way of doing it. And then we'll scale the gap here so that we have room behind for walking. I think need to shove these guys forward a bit just to maintain this walk space around the outside. Doesn't need to be a lot of walk space, even if you've got to duck slightly. At least you can just get around there. Oops, just teleported to the shuttle and back. This is probably something worth pointing out for anyone that hasn't seen our test shuttle stuff. So as you can see, right now we are at Earth, and Earth is surrounded by potatoes. And all of that is being managed by our proxy system. So from the perspective of the shuttle, the galactic coordinates are that of Earth, and the local coordinates within the system are that of Earth. And all of these potatoes that we spawned are all their galactic coordinates is all Earth. So we can see all the potatoes and Earth from the perspective of the shuttle. If we exit the shuttle and go back onto the Caravella, we can see that it's teleported us back to Earth, so that's good. Oh, I know why. It's because we didn't set the number on there. But the point is that the shuttle and the ship can have completely different perspectives on the galaxy, meaning they are both independent vessels in their own right, as are all the potatoes. So all the potatoes existed for the shuttle, but not the Caravella. So if I fix that, so our target vessel is 0 rather than 1, and we just try that again. Yeah. Oh, hang on a minute, let's move this spawn point. So grab our player controller. So when we're spawning our player here, we are picking our map. From here, vessel ID. So we're setting that on game instance. Yeah, hopefully changing this won't break anything else. But yeah, if our vessel ID is 1, hang on a minute, that's oh, it's the other way around. Right, yes. Sorry, that's me forgetting what I did. Right, the target vessel being 1 is the shuttle, and then the Caravella was classed as 2. So if we go down to where we've hidden the actual shuttle interior, then the teleporter should be going to 0, not 2. Then you can go between the two vessels, which means that 2, this is the Caravella, we need to change this. So if we do minus, say, 600, and I think we said it was 325, so if we just do 330. That should put us on the bridge. Hey, Delta. It didn't put us on the bridge. What? Well, that makes no sense. How can it put us where we just were if I changed the transform in there? Yeah, so we're spawning our character with the transform that we're specifying. We're not loading a tutorial, so we're definitely taking this transform. And we're giving it that value, which we've just changed. So how could it possibly spawn us where we were? Makes no sense. I shall dig into that further, because that makes no sense whatsoever. But anyway, so here we are at a random star system. If we jump through here, it'll update to Earth. There we go. So that's us hopping across the galaxy to Earth. So there's Earth, there's all the potatoes, and if we go back through to the Caravella and wait for that to update, we're now here in a completely different star system. So that's basically 2 ships in different locations in the galaxy, and you're able to transition between them. The update speed when we transition, that kind of lag you get, that's the Galaxy Gen doing a full regeneration, because we are outside of the sector that the Caravella is in. So it's doing a full 27 sector regen. That takes a lot longer in the editor than it does in a packaged game, so that jump between the two should be a lot quicker when packaged. But I will leave this here for our Caravella test level, so that you can see what it's like to experience the galaxy from 2 different locations. It's basically just it's proving the tech that shuttles and the main ship can be separate things in space. Okay, so everything else seems to be working. I suppose we should try scanning a planet. So that one. So let's send that to the helm. Go to the sensor target. So that should take us just within range of that, which we already are. So it's given up because we're already there. Right, hang on. should be in range now. Yep, there we go. So now we're in scanning range. Okay, yep, that scanned and it saved it as well. And so this is another thing we don't have, is we don't have our planet painting tool either. Okay, so let's add that. These are all the different standalone components that we need to do the various bits and pieces that are needed for the ship. So let's just make sure we grab the actual reference to that. Where are we doing it? Doing it there, nope. Yeah, that. So we are getting that, which is in Galaxy Systems. Okay. Just need to work out where it was squirreled away. It's probably a few things that I need to get a shot of and move them into a more sensible class. But the nice thing about this is going to be turning these into physical server racks. Yeah, I need to look at the most performant way of managing the 2D screens, because the 2D screen requires a render target which is being written to at 60 FPS in order to get smooth visuals. I mean, we could probably dial that down to 30 FPS and it look all right. But ultimately, yes, any kind of view screen requires a render target. And it's going to require a full cube map render target as well. So they're not cheap to do on the GPU, or CPU mostly. But yes, if we can make it cheap, then yes, we can have view screens on shuttles. Or the shuttle would just have instrumentation only. Let's get rid of that. So we don't have a planet on the bridge. Okay, so let's try our scan again. Yeah, we can do, and we're going to have security cameras all over the ship. And of course, those security cameras need to render to a render target. Luckily for security cameras, they can just be 2D planes because they're only facing in one direction. And we only need to actually update the render target when that particular security camera is active. So that makes that a little bit less stressful. And with a security camera, we don't need to update that at 60 FPS. Oh, stop. Almost missed it. Okay, there we go. We definitely need a domed window there so that we can fit things in a little bit better on the bridge. Plus it will make it feel not quite as low down in here. Yeah, and I think these guys definitely need to scoot forward a bit. We don't need like this much room. It feels like there would be fine. Is that showing the Magellan's engines? Oh, it is. So there's an idea of scale for you. So that's the Magellan's engines there. So the Magellan is like this big. So that needs sorting. The server room's going to be a combination of this stuff, just for the giggles of it, really. I love the idea that there's a server rack that says Galaxy Gen on it, so the little server box on the ship is generating the entire universe. Yeah, simulation theory and all. Yeah, and the rest of it can just be on unmarked server racks. And the nice thing is that when these things are doing stuff, I can actually have all the lights flashing on the little server modules, so you can see all the stuff happening live, albeit as little servers. We've already got permission from Dell to use their logo and design on the server racks, so we'll have Dell servers running on the ship, just like a really futuristic version of them. Yeah, I'm sure there was a fifth one that we needed, but that seems to be everything we need for this. Let's just let's see how we are for like height of stuff. So yeah, so these all need raising up to be more kind of here-ish, so that they can be actually used. Let's test the NPC captain actually. Needs to be flagged as spawnable. Can spawn NPC. Okay. So let's move all these up a bit. Yeah, one of the other things we want in the server room is the servers that actually control things like the holo display and the sensors data and everything else. So we do want things on the ship to stop working if damage happens in the server room, and things like data storage as well. So if the data stores are damaged, then all of your saved data won't be available on the sensors. We did discuss the idea of having that permanently lost if they're destroyed, but I think that would cause too much pain for players, so you don't want to lose hundreds of systems worth of exploration data. So we'll make it so that if those server racks are damaged to the point of being non-operational, then when you go and look at your saved data, there'll be none, and you look at your sensors data, then things will look like they've been unscanned because your actual data modules are all destroyed. So you'll have to go and repair them, and then the data comes back on the sensors and the helm and everything else. So we get that cause and effect of server modules being broken without permanent loss. Yeah, magic backups. Yeah, I remember that old thing with seatbelts. They're saying cars don't need seatbelts; they just need a giant spike on the steering wheel, and then people will drive a lot more carefully. Right, we don't need Mr. Scale Dude anymore, he can go. And I shall move this out of the way a bit so that it doesn't get walked into by accident. Right, let's see if we can fix that spawn location, because we don't want that. So it must be getting its spawn location from somewhere else, or the character is being moved somewhere else after having been spawned, because, well, if I disconnect that entirely, we still appear in the same place. Yes, we do. Oh look, the captain's doing stuff. Okay, so we should see the ship suddenly start doing things. What was the last thing they said? Oh. Okay, so they're performing a long-range survey. Oh, there we go. Okay, so our NPC crew is successfully flying the ship. All on their lonesome. Well done them. Right, okay, so that's clearly being ignored. So, getting our game instance, grabbing our vessel ID. Let's just see whether or not we're actually doing that, because that would help, wouldn't it? Okay, so we're not explicitly setting it here, so let's do exactly that. Because what seems to be happening is we are, oh right, I've just figured out what's happening in my head. So the location we're spawning in is where the conference room is on the Magellan. So what it's doing is it's trying to put us in a conference room, but because the floor we're on is lower than actually no, it's not lower, because right now hang on, I get it. So the middle of the ship is here, so that's the equivalent of the floor of the bridge on the Magellan. Now the conference room is back from there and over a bit, which would be here, and that's, funnily enough, where this room is that we were spawning in. So this is the equivalent location of the conference room on the Magellan, because what we weren't doing is setting our vessel ID there. That's what the problem was. Now, this may have a knock-on effect of the other stuff not working, because when we get our ship ID, our ship state, it goes on the ID of what ship the player is on. So I'm just hoping that that's not going to break when we exit the the shuttle, which it might very well do, because we set our ship ID on teleport. So I think it'll work fine at this point. We need to be higher up than this. We are stuck in the floor. Easy solution. Give up on life. There we go. Yeah, so right now we are here, obviously. If we hop onto the shuttle, it goes, okay, we're at Earth, hop off of the shuttle. Now the issue now is our perspective on the galaxy is no longer ship ID 0. Yeah, we're still in the same system there. Oh no, we updated it, didn't we, to say 0. No, we're good. We are good. No, we're fine. Don't panic, it's all good. Right, so we need to set that plus the half height of the mesh, which I think is 90. So that should put us squarely on our feet. And we need to go forward a bit more. So let's go forward another 2 meters. It might be a bit too far forward, but let's try that. Yeah, that'll do. Maybe a smidge back, but okay, so we need to make sure we turn off the captain spawning by default, because obviously they just immediately appear and start doing stuff. We don't want them to do that unless you tell them to. But that's yeah, that's working.
Long range survey.
What else? What else? What else? I suppose we could move this down into the shuttle bay, but I guess I'll just leave it there for testing purposes. We are, or rather I am, so me and Claire argue about this all the time. So I would really like to add a shipyards expansion where we take the Starfield approach, or the No Man's Sky approach, where we can kit bash vessels with component pieces. Now I'm a huge fan of Lego, and I love the idea of taking that Lego philosophy into the game, build all these prefab pieces, bolt them all together, make a ship out of it. Because of the complexity of our internal infrastructure, i.e. all the pipes and cables, like this one, camera. So in order for power to get to this box, obviously we've got a power cable that runs all the way through here, all the way through here. And that power cable meets up with this box. And of course, this box is powered by these batteries, and all of these batteries are powered by these cables, which run down the stairwell into the reactor room, and then the reactor is powered by those, and blah blah blah, and all that's powering the reactor. And it's just, there's a lot of infrastructure across the ship, and even with this one test cable, it won't be one long cable going the whole route. This is going to be broken up into segments, so there might be 10 to 15 segments of cable. Basically each one of these gaps will probably have a separate segment in it, so that, you know, if you take damage here, then that particular segment there might be damaged and broken, so as an engineer you pull off this panel to replace that bit of cable. Now if you imagine that from a shipbuilding perspective, what you've got is a nightmare of infrastructure that needs to connect with other like infrastructure in the right direction. So a ship like this would have to be split up into pieces so that we have edges that connect perfectly together, so that those two cables meet on those prefabricated edges. And it's going to have to be modular in order for everything to fit together. And we do it as well where the power plant for the ship and the base chassis that holds that power plant in place, that's going to be the that's the thing you start with. So there'll be a solid chassis that you then start bolting pieces onto to make a vessel. So when you would start building a ship, you would choose the chassis and power plant, and then you'd work from there, because we need to make sure that obviously all this stuff is all properly piped up and working, because it's fully simulated. If any of the cables don't meet or any of the pipes don't line up, then things stop working on the ship. So that's just, you know, a fact of life with how we've done our simulation. Yes, so I really am very excited about modular shipbuilding and building the tools and systems to allow that, because once we hand that over to players, the amount of creativity that players show in the likes of Starfield and No Man's Sky is just huge. You know, people build some impressive things, and I want to provide players with the tools to be able to do that, but obviously not yet. We got a lot of stuff to finish before we even begin to start thinking about that. But as we build more vessels, and as we start building like the backer ships, I'm going to be building those tools and systems with that in mind, so that when we do eventually fire the trigger on doing modular shipbuilding, we've already done the groundwork for it already. So yeah, that's the long-term goal, the ability to make ships with modular pieces. And of course we can market that as well. So in terms of funding the studio and keeping development moving, we can sell theme packs that are basically themed modules. So rather than, you know, just a piece, we would say, right, here's a steampunk pack. So we would have all of the ship pieces that we have to date, and all of them would be in a steampunk theme, or like, you know, a NASA punk themed pack, where again we take the entire library of pieces and update every single one of them to be in a particular style, and then we'd sell that as a pack with all the pieces. But yeah, that's something to look at, and it's something that could really help fund the studio. Yeah, kind of like Conan Hats, except like we have stipulated again and again and promised that we are never going to have microtransactions, and we are never going to sell cosmetics in that way. So when we're talking about selling a theme pack for shipbuilding, we're talking literally hundreds of pieces, all themed with a consistent style. That's not a small amount of work, and I don't mind charging for things that took a lot of time and effort to make. If it was something like, you know, you can buy this golden gun skin, then no, of course we wouldn't sell that, because, you know, that's like a texture or a material update that takes all of like 15 seconds. If we put a price tag on something, it's because it took time and effort to develop. And I think that's where we draw the line between something which is a microtransaction and like a macro transaction. I know, that's how I've got it in my head. In my head, if it takes time and effort, we charge for it. If it doesn't, then we don't. Yeah, like Like the fact that you can customize all the carpets and all the walls and everything, because that was free to develop. It didn't take particularly long to add the ability to do those things. So we wouldn't charge for different carpet colors and different wall colors, because that's just part of the ship customization. But if you're talking an entire library of custom themed pieces, then yes, that's significant enough that we put a price tag on it. Yep, 1-to-1 Milky Way galaxy. And the surrounding area. Yeah, shiny gun skins. Yeah, and again, I'm absolutely in support of modding. So I'm happy to basically release a pack of templates to say, right, so here's all the base pieces. Here's the framework, like the internal framework for these pieces. They just won't have any hull plating on them. They won't have any internal wall panels or anything. And then we can hand that over to modders and say, it doesn't matter what you do on the outside or on the inside, just don't touch the framework and don't touch the wiring, and it should work fine in the game. But again, this is a way off in the future thing. We've got to finish the game first. Yes, you can, Prometheus. It's no different than Minecraft. Just host a session, stick a password on it, and all your friends can join. So I think that's pretty much everything we needed to make the Caravella flyable. I don't think there's anything we've missed in that regard. It should be just as capable as the Magellan now, albeit very much unfinished. Let's do a test package just to be absolutely sure that it does in fact work. Yeah, well, fortunately, we have a very set of deliverables that we want for the game. So when we say the game finished, I mean the set of deliverables that we set out for Kickstarter. That's what I would call the game finished. Everything we do after that is just new stuff. So, and this is one of the things we've been trying to define, actually. In fact, here's one I prepared earlier. So, so we've been working on this document, which is basically building out what early access looks like, what things we need for early access, and where we are in the development process of those things. So I've not touched this in a couple of weeks, as is typically the case. But yes, me and Claire are determined to get this document finished so that we have an absolute written in stone, black and white list of everything that we want for early access. And when this document is completed and everything's ticked off, that is the base game done, essentially. And when the base game is done, then we can start looking at the expansions and we can start looking at other things. So things like the shipbuilding add-on, things like some of the standalone add-ons that I'd like to do that are separate from the expansions, and we can start looking at those. But yeah, so this is going to be the master plan for early access. Obviously, we'll share this when it's done. No, Dave. We've left off the PvP mode specifically, because that's going to be something that we tackle afterwards. It's not high on the list of what people want, so we want to get the base sandbox done, and then we'll look at the other stuff. Yeah, Claire keeps showing me how many people are asking that question, and yes, the hot question right now is, when is the demo update coming out? And the simple answer to that, in black and white, oh, that failed, is when all of these bad bugs are fixed. So we'll go through, actually another job we need to do is go through the bug tracker and flag blockers for the demo update. If I'm going to set everything to blocker that is preventing the demo update coming out right now, even if it's something silly, just so that we know, right, this is the list of things we need to fix for the demo. Once those things are fixed, then we can put the demo out. But obviously there are some, it's not so bad single player. In single player it's actually fairly stable, but in multiplayer we've got quite a few issues. And most of those issues are just things not replicating properly, or I haven't finished implementing the replication, which is usually the case. So you'll press a button, host sees it, client does not. Just things like that. Hopefully a lot of those are fairly easy to fix. But yeah, so we do have a list of bugs that need fixing, although I like seeing green. Right, why didn't that package? I swear it just comes up with random errors these days. So we've got some pin errors on there. Same on there. See, the funny thing is, this packaged absolutely fine at the beginning of the stream. I literally packaged it as I was starting the stream. And now, during the course of the stream, all this stuff broke. Sigh. Go in, press compile. Right, what are we fixing? So that's probably not needed at all. Okay, that's that one fixed. Nice and simple. If in doubt, delete it. So that was that one. Right, what's this going on about? I'm choosing to believe that it was game state that was actually messing that up. We haven't even touched the radial menu during the stream, so there's no reason for it to have broken. And what's worse, I've run out of tea. Yeah, planetary landings. Planetary landings is something that I'd say probably 99.9% of the Explorer crowd want from the game, myself included. One of the things I'm most excited about, in fact, is designing the alien flora and fauna and designing those surface environments and building the procedural system to create those surface environments. I really get genuinely excited about looking at the light being cast from the star, how that's affected by the atmosphere, and how the plants need to adapt to the conditions of a planet, so that the plants you find on planetary surfaces are quite literally designed for their environment. And yeah, I want to throw myself into that. So that's one of the main selling points of the exploration side of the game, is being able to go down to planets and explore on foot and really experience these diverse alien biospheres. So yeah, it's definitely not something I want to cut out. But the tech for that is half done already. So we've already got the ability to generate our landscape. That landscape that's being generated is already being driven by the same height map that we use for planetary balls in space. So that's good. It's a shared resource. So the island you see from space will definitely be there on the surface. The assets is just an asset pool. So we just need to either pay someone, or I need to make some plants. We might be able to find some on the market we can modify. We definitely want to leverage the new tools in 5.7. So something we can do for plants in Unreal is use 5.7's kind of speed tree style system, where it will generate a dynamic plant based on the assets that you give it. So you give it the leaf assets, it will do the branches and spawn the leaves and everything for you. So you don't need to make the mesh as a finished product for the plant. You just need to make a leaf, and the system handles the rest. So we can author like hundreds of different leaf shapes and leaf styles, and obviously throwing a color palette at that is simple. That's the easiest part of the equation. So here's a leaf, here's its color palette. Give me a plant, please. And then you obviously tell the procedural system, I want it to be, short and fat, or long and spindly, and it will do all of that and produce that asset. So that's kind of a solved problem from 5.7. We just need to give it an asset pool of leaf shapes, and we can even procedurally do that as well, because nanite foliage uses a static mesh and not a masked plane for its leaves. We can use dynamic mesh creation to procedurally create the leaf mesh just using a dynamic mesh component within Unreal. So we can say, with this seed value, generate a funky shaped leaf, and it will just create a leaf as a static mesh, which the plant system then creates into a plant. So there's a lot of hard work there, which the procedural system does the heavy lifting for, which is quite nice. The rest of it, textures are easy. There's plenty of like Megascans textures we can use for planetary surfaces. They're all pre-made. We don't need to waste time making those. Things like bark textures, there's plenty of those on Megascans that we can use. We'll just obviously recolor them where needed. There's a lot of stuff. I would say, of all the things that we need to do for early access, there are only two things that make me wibble a little bit. The first one is the character system, and ultimately I want nothing to do with it. So I want to hand our character system over to a third party and say, build us something that meets our spec requirements and that we can use with metahumans. Give it to them, let them do it, because I don't want to get involved in that. The other thing is the player to shuttle to planet, and then player to planet transitions. That's going to be the biggest challenge of everything, because it's not about the doing it. The doing it's easy. It's managing the transitions that's the hard part. So how do we get the player smoothly into the shuttle proxy and then have that smoothly fly out of the shuttle bay whilst being witnessed from outside observers in the shuttle bay, and have all of that be completely seamless to the player. I know how I want to do it, but obviously having it planned in my head and have it work in reality are two different things. So like we've already got this aspect of it done. So we know for sure that the player can exist on a shuttle completely separately from the main ship in its own version of the galaxy. We've done that, we've proven that it's working. The next step in the process is to get the player on that shuttle more smoothly, have that shuttle be able to fly down to the surface, and then have the player be able to get out of the shuttle in that surface environment. So that's the challenge, not making the surfaces. Again, like surface environments in Unreal, it's a solved problem. It's the transitions that's the fun part. Yeah, we'll have space stations, but the game is not designed for the player to stay anywhere. Like, your ship is your mobile base of operations. So we're not building a game where you can establish a colony and stay there and build a settlement and all that sort of stuff. That's not the game. Because your ship, especially the bigger ones, they're already a city in space. They already have like hundreds of crew members. So your colony goes with you through the galaxy wherever you go. So the base building gameplay you're looking for takes place on your ship. Things like having a better food supply, upgrading the various bits of infrastructure, all of that takes place on your ship. So you don't need a base because you've already got one that you're flying around. So when it comes to things like alien stations, you'll be there as a visitor. You're not there to stay. JVC, yeah, so when it comes to reference frames and stuff, if I grab the shuttle a minute, you can see that was instant because we are in the same place. We should, and probably can't, see the Caravella because it's not spawning its proxy. If the Caravella was currently spawning its proxy, we'd see it down below us right now, but we haven't added that code to it. But you can see that the NPCs are doing stuff on the bridge, and what you're seeing up there is the static interior of the ship, so that doesn't move anywhere. All these potatoes are not actually here. They're part of the physics sim, so you're seeing a proxy for those items. And again, I'm in a static interior of a shuttle, and what the Caravella sees above its bridge is the proxy for the shuttle. So the ship's about to leave. Now, if we had the proxy running, in fact, I might add that in a minute so we can see it happen. But you would see the ship zoom off into space, leaving us behind. In fact, that would be cool to see, so I will add that in a sec. But if we now exit this, did it too soon. Sorry. So here we are leaving Earth. And again, so we are on a static ship. So this ship is not moving. What's moving is space. And it doesn't matter that we are miles away on the shuttle, because the shuttle has its own perspective on the galaxy. So we could walk through this portal and be teleporting ourselves literally thousands of light years away, and the game doesn't care because it's managing those reference frames and each interior is static. So all it's doing is it's offsetting the galaxy by where the ship is. So again, we are currently next to, I think that's Venus, and in here we're still next to Earth. And yeah, so basically what this is, and I try and kind of express to Claire all the time how important this is, because the problem that this has solved is the problem of having multiple vessels in the game be able to fly anywhere in any direction independently and have their own complete experience within the game's universe. So again, being able to see all these potatoes floating in space from the perspective of the shuttle, and then having none of those things be there from the perspective of the Caravella class, means that both of those ships are experiencing the galaxy independently, and can interact with those things independently as well. So like the shuttle can go up there and bump into all the potatoes and things and bounce off of them and move them around, and the Caravella, oops, I need to change the direction of that teleporter, and the Caravella doesn't care. So it's a big deal. It's a really big deal, because it means we've solved the problem of separate reference frames. And indeed with planetary surfaces, I've taken out the teleporter for now, but if I was to add that back in and we teleport to a surface, what you see in the sky is relative to that planet's location in the galaxy. So the planet is no different than a shuttle. So if we just walk through the portal to the surface, then what you see in space is relative to the planet, which means that the planet is actually no different to a shuttle or the ship, which means yes, we can fly planets around. And I'm sure at some point we'll take advantage of that. But yes, planets can be ships too. It's all relative. So I love the idea of, well, something like a Death Star. We can have something as big as a Death Star flying around the game, because all we're doing is moving space around the object. So it doesn't matter how big that object is. Scale is not an issue, because the interior is always static. But yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But yeah, so this is running in a packaged game and it's all working, so excellent. Right, so what we'd like to see is we want to see that proxy spawning. So let's do that. Yeah, having the planets move in their orbits is slightly more complicated, because that affects things like space stations that are in orbit around them. But yeah, as a standalone object, a planet can be a spaceship easily. Yes, Illusion, actually. Yes. Yeah, quite easily, because all we're doing is we're updating the reference frame in terms of that object's perspective on the galaxy. That's it. That's all we're doing. So the galaxy is driven by the galactic coordinates of the reference frame that you are in. When you're on the ship, that's your galactic coordinates that the ship is in. When you're on a shuttle, it has its own galactic coordinates. That's the reference frame that drives what you see outside. So the Galaxy Gen system is constantly checking where you are or what your current coordinates are to make sure that what it draws around you matches your coordinates. So if you were to go down to a planetary surface and that planetary surface had helm controls on it, you could quite legitimately fly that planetary surface through space and you'd see space whizzing past up in the sky. because again, all we're doing is moving space around the static environment that you're stood on. So yeah, so we could have something like a Dyson sphere flying around space quite easily. And indeed, I'm sure we will explore that, later down the line, because having that ability makes for some exciting stuff, I think. But this is why we went with the approach of having static interiors and moving space around that static interior, because it removes all scale problems from the equation. It doesn't matter how big or how complex the ship is, because it's not moving, it's static in space. It does mean that space obviously has a limit as to how complicated it can be, because the more you move in the engine, the harder it is to compute. So there is an upper limit on how much stuff we can move at once in the game, which is why we can't do real-time planetary landings. Because a planetary surface is obviously full of grass and rocks and trees and squirrels and ants, and all of that stuff would have to move with the planet, and obviously calculating that on a physics engine level would be nigh on impossible, so that the planetary surface has to remain static. So that's why we have to have a transition from the shuttle to the surface, so that we can load into that static surface environment. If we went with real-time planetary landings, then we could not have lush planetary surfaces. They'd have to be very sparse. So yes, we could have the typical terrain that you see in Elite or Space Engine, and have that real-time landing experience with the geography, but we couldn't then have lush forests full of ground clutter, because that stuff would have to move around the ship. And again, too much stuff, you can't move it all at once. So that's why we had to make the decision to go with transitions for surfaces, so that we can throw everything Unreal can do at planetary surfaces. And if you've seen what Unreal can do, like for forests and things, it's exceptionally good. So we can have that in the game and also be able to fly around the galaxy. So I think the benefit offset of having transitions for planetary landings is far outweighed by just how lush those landings can be once you get down there. Right, anyway, shut up, Dan, stop waffling, God. Right, so we want to spawn a proxy, and I think we will borrow from our test one, and just spawn the same proxy it was spawning. So where is our... not that one, not that one. What did I do with it? There. Where are you hiding? Oh, it's in the shuttle folder. Of course it is. Okay, so this spawn proxy ship is basically how we want to represent the ship in space from the perspective of another ship. Again, it is a solved problem, but we do need to build it into the solution. So on begin play, I guess we'll just stick it over here for now. So we're going to spawn our proxy object, and we will create a reference to that. We'll just use the Caravella for now. This is only really relevant for the Caravella because we don't have a visible shuttle on the Magellan at the moment. We don't need to spawn any thrusters. Not yet, actually. Saying that, I'm going to I'm going to keep that, and that's going to do that. Yeah, so we'll leave that for now, but we'll keep it in the code. So having spawned the proxy object, and we need to make sure that the relative transform matches the relative transform of our bridge offset versus the offset of where we've placed the physical object. Because again, we have physical interiors that the player can explore, and then we teleport that player between those static interiors. So we need to know how far away that interior is. And as a complete aside, if I continue to waffle about this, every time we spawn a planetary surface or a shuttle or a space station or anything else that you can get in and walk around, we need to spawn that interior below your ship somewhere, like really far down below your ship where you can't see it. And we need to reserve slots somehow. So I guess we need like a slot reservation manager, so that every time we spawn a new object, we look for a spare slot, insert the interior and load it into that slot, and then manage this offset dynamically so we know where that slot is in terms of its vertical height above and below the ship. Because all you're doing really as a player is you're being teleported up and down these stack of interiors seamlessly via portals. So hopefully it is as invisible as possible from the perspective of the player, but you're going up and down this stack of things. So we should be able to model any kind of interior environment as long as we can spawn it dynamically within the stack and then manage the offset dynamically as well, along with all the IDs that go with it, so that we know which version of space we're drawing around the ship. It's kind of where like my mad scientist like hat has to be put on. It sounds mental, but it works. Right, so that's the local movement side of things. We need to grab one of these bazillion tabs. Right, so we need to update proxy. So we need that function because we need to tell the proxy where it is in space, basically. Because what we're doing is we don't need that though. We'll leave it for now, but we spawn the proxy object, and then that proxy updates its location in the real physical world relative to the location and position of its simulated version of itself, so that what you see out the window is where it actually is relative to the ship that you're on. And that's where the kind of like the complicated math bit comes into it. So hang on, let's just open the proxy a minute. So we don't need to worry about the thrusters. Right, so yeah, so we're getting our ship state, blah blah blah. Right, so we're doing that direct, so that's nice and easy. Doing our object transform, that should handle that. Right, so we just need to make sure that the proxy that we're spawning knows where it is. Let's just test this a minute. So we should see the shuttle above the bridge. I might need to undo my save game for this so that we can start in the same place as the shuttle. Yeah, that's no good. We'll take that off so we're not loading the save game. That's probably going to mess some stuff up, but we shall see. Right, there's the shuttle, there are the potatoes. We're back at Earth. Okay. Right, so from the perspective of the ship, we can see the shuttle above it. So from the perspective of the shuttle, we should be able to look down and see the ship, which we cannot. So obviously that's the static version. We don't care about that one. We want to see the non-static version below. So yeah, so we need to make sure we get that right. Yeah, so do that, set that, setting it with the right mesh, setting the location there, and then, oh, hang on. Yeah, that should just make it visible or not, depending on what ship you're on. But if I disconnect that, it should be visible at all times, which I might just do. Make sure it's not hidden in game. Yeah, let's assume it to always be visible for a minute. Which means, actually, that when we spawn in, we should see the proxy Caravella right on top of us where we currently are, and if we do not, then it's not working properly, basically. So we can't see the ring or anything else, so that means that the proxy ship is not behaving. Now, I don't think we need to do anything specific. Yeah, that was just making the thrusters visible, so that doesn't do anything useful for us. Yeah, I don't need to do that. Don't need to do that. That's just spawning the proxy there. Oh, hang on, is it this one? Right, yes. Right, so that's what we're missing. So we need to tell the proxy where it is. Now I thought I was doing that the other way around, and I might make sure we do that the other way around, but let's just pop this in and make sure that we can see the proxy object. So we'll grab that, and we shall pop that on here temporarily. So basically it's 60 FPS, so that's 60 FPS. It's telling this where to be. And it's doing that using, just make sure we're using the right variables here. Yeah, so it's just grabbing the location and rotation of the vessel and piping that through. Okay, there we go. So here we see the offset at work. So the question is it too low or too high? Too low. Okay, so yeah, so the proxy version of the ship is obviously lower down than it should be, and my instinct tells me that that is the exact distance from the bridge down to the middle of the ship. Okay, so when... bearing in mind it's in the wrong place. Can we see it? Right, there it goes. Not sure if it's actually going to go or not. Are you going to go? Or are you just going to sit there? Oh, now it's going. Oh, is it trying and failing? What's it doing? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, right. Yeah, so... Yes, I was thinking about this the other day. So, obviously, it's updating stuff based on the ship that you're currently on. So when we're grabbing some of this data, obviously we're grabbing it based on your current ship. So some of these systems need to grab information differently, because like on here we're getting our ship state based on our current vessel. Now if it's a system on the bridge that needs to perform a particular action, then it's not the current vessel it should be working with, it's its own vessel ID. So in the case of anything on the Magellan or anything on the Caravella, it should be getting reference 0 every single time, not what we're currently sat on, which is why as soon as we entered the bridge, it suddenly went to FTL, because our current vessel ID became 0. So that's going to need smoothing off so that the ship won't wait for you to be on it before doing something. But that aside, we also need to work out why the proxy 1 is offset and 2 can't be seen from the shuttle in its correct location. So I suppose let's just stick it right in the middle for a start. So we are broadcasting that. Okay. And obviously we're replicating that so that it's visible to clients. Okay, yeah, so we're getting our object transform. This is the thing that we're updating. So we're positioning it relative to our current vessel. Okay, so that's... Why are we dropping it down? So that this will be part of the issue. Let's just skip that a minute. Right, so that's the two objects absolutely on top of one another, which is the behavior we want to see for the ship. Yeah, so we can see the ring and everything at the back. So if we go onto the shuttle, yeah, then it's still up there. Okay. So we need to offset that by how far away our interior is on here, which would be this, basically. Okay, so if it's the Magellan, so the bridge on the Magellan is that far off of the world origin vertically. That's that whole 10 meters I was talking about earlier. The shuttle is 50,000 units offset. So if our current vessel is the shuttle, we need to know how much to offset that by relative to the shuttle's origin versus the origin of the other ship. So basically we need to know where this is. So okay, yeah, so this one is that far down. So we need to offset that by that amount so that they line up. And if we're on the Caravella, then it's 0, because the Caravella's origin point is in the right place versus the Magellan's. Oh, and of course, yes. Yeah, so I need to set ship ID 0 to that, actually, because otherwise that's in the wrong place. But it should be in the right place for the shuttle now. Yeah, there. So, don't go out there. Yeah, so we can now see the proxy of the Caravella below the shuttle, where it should be, versus the shuttle. I really needed a less awkward shuttle thing that I could actually explore with outside. Why do they make that not jumpable? Let's see whether or not it moves. Hey, Naughty Ninja. Good to have you aboard. Oh, there we go. So the autopilot obviously is pointing the ship at the target in question. So we have obviously the proxy. The proxy is behaving relative to that. If I do that and then quickly jump through again, then yeah, it's gone. So obviously it went so quick when it went to FTL that it disappeared off somewhere. So we need to ask ourselves, why is it not going to FTL unless we're on the bridge? So let's do that back to 0, because we don't really have an option 2 anymore. In fact, we can get rid of that. Yeah, so 0 is relevant for this, and I think we're going to have to do a ship check specifically for the offset for there. that's fine. So I'll plug this in a sec. So this vessel ID. So that's defaulting to 1. So we need to set that. It's on the proxy, isn't it? So where are we setting that on here? No, so we definitely need to set that. So when we spawn this, we need to make sure that this is exposed on spawn. And replicated, because for clients they need to make sure that that is set. So now on here we need to set the vessel ID as 0, because this is the proxy for the main ship, so it's always reference 0. Let's just make sure that it is invisible once that's set. No, still there. Okay, so make sure it's still visible from here. Yeah, so we can still see it from the shuttle. And we should not be able to see it from this ship. To be honest, we can get rid of that entirely, because that's probably what's breaking it. So that's more like it. Okay, so we can't see it from this ship, so the proxy is invisible to us. But if we go onto the shuttle, we can see the proxy. So the Caravella is there, right where it should be. And if we hop off, you can see we go through it, because it's not actually there, it's just a proxy. So now we need to work out what's going on the bridge that's preventing the ship from doing what it's supposed to be doing. Oh, thank you, Belthorian. Yes, please do like and subscribe. The more likes and subscribes we can get, the more people can see the game. Oh yeah, just to answer your question, this blueprint code, these are basically, for the most part, exposed C++ functions. So in the base C++, you can define a function as being blueprint exposed, and you can then use that function in the blueprints. And then what it does at compile time is it puts it back to C++ in a way. As far as I remember, there's an emulation layer running that emulates the environment needed to convert the blueprints to C++ at runtime. So there is a performance deficit to doing things in blueprints because it has to go through that emulation layer in order for that to be treated as raw C++ when the game's running. So if it's something which runs on tick, if it's something that basically is running real-time math or anything like that, you're better off doing it in C++. If it's something which is event-driven and it's, I don't know, UI work or a character animation or something like that, you can do that in Blueprints because it's quicker and easier. If you need the performance, you should do it in C++. But I find following the logic of things so much easier with Blueprints because you're literally working with flowcharts, and yeah, that just makes life really easy when you're trying to figure out why some logic didn't do the thing it was supposed to do. And in this instance, there's going to be something here. Actually, let's check the ship itself. So we are broadcasting our ship state. So we are firing it into index 0. And that's always going to be index 0 for our base vessel, our base ship. Anything else that we add, like the shuttle, will be index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dynamically as required. But your base ship that you start the game with should always be index 0. So I think what we've done is we're calling the macro that grabs this data from game state whenever we need the ship data, without paying attention to the fact that actually sometimes you might not be on the ship and that data is still needed. For example, it's going to be something like this one, maybe. I guess we really need to just find anything which is referencing that macro and work out whether or not it's something that should be referencing the ship that it's on, as in the ship that the UI is on, or whether it's something that should be referencing where the player is. In fact, I think the only time we don't care what ship we're on is going to be the shuttle. Hang on, yeah, because yeah, right. So the object transform for the proxy is driven by the physics sim object. So when that physics sim object is flying around and bumping into things, it's telling the proxy what its transform is in world space. What the proxy is doing is it's finding the location and rotation of the environment that the player is currently in. And again, that could be a planetary surface, it could be the shuttle, it could be a space station looking out the window. That's where the player is, that's the player's context. And it offsets those two vectors to work out where in space the proxy object should be placed. And again, we offset that by the vertical location of our reference frame, and that's how far away from the world origin vertically are we. It might also be worth just checking to see whether or not we are also left or right of the world origin, because in which case these would need adjusting too. But generally speaking, we should just be vertically straight down. I could actually use player's transform for this, couldn't I? Huh. I'll think on that. But yeah, so in this instance, we absolutely definitely need to know what vessel the ship is on, what vessel the player is on, like where is the player. In other instances, like anything on the ship itself that's updating its UIs, it needs to know about its own ship and its own details, not what the player is on. So when the player exits that ship and gets on the shuttle, essentially this is breaking for those instances. So if we find references to this, and I guess we need to do that across the board, which it's not going to let me do. I wanted to do a find reference all on that, but because it's a macro that's running on a macro library, that does make life more awkward. I mean, I could maybe fix this by pulling this based on whether or not we're on the main ship or not. And if I default that to no, hang on, what should we call this? So primary vessel, let's call it that. And if we do a select on this, okay. So if primary vessel is true, in fact, let's move that round so it lines up better. Yeah, so if primary vessel is true, we just get the actual ship. If it's not, then we get whatever vessel we're on. So we just need primary vessel to default to true. Okay. And then on our proxy object, we turn that off, and then all other instances of this macro will remain true. Which means that should allow the ship to do what it needs to do without the player being on the bridge. Okay, so we exit the ship. So there's our proxy. In actual fact, I think that proxy is a bit too low down there. I'm sure it should be higher up than that, because I thought we were kind of in line with the ring. So if we just wait for the... If I face this way, we should see it go off. Hang on, which way is it flying? Face that way, maybe. So as soon as they've done their medium range survey, we should see that it zoom off kind of that way. Just waiting for the helm to say something. Okay. Oh, there it goes. Is it gonna go? Now it's definitely waiting. So as soon as I enter the bridge, I bet it just goes. Yeah. Okay, why? So the fix we did on the macro was definitely needed regardless. So do we have some logic? Yeah, so in the logic here, obviously we're checking against our ship state, and this should always be the primary vessel for this NPC, because the NPC sat literally in that helm chair, so there's only one vessel it cares about. Again there. Again there. Okay, so this is where it should be engaging the FTL drive. Hang on a minute. Is the FTL drive engaged? Yes. That's the wrong way around, isn't it? Oh, wait. I see what's happening there. I wrote the wrong thing. So, are we currently at sublight? Because that's what we're checking. Are we currently at sublight? Yes, we are. So we need to engage the FTL drive, where we are sending that. Okay. If we're not at sublight, then yes, the assumption is that either we're on our way, or the ship is not in a state in which FTL would be possible anyway. So we can get rid of all of that. I don't need that. So navigate to location is absolutely what's being called. And we can see that so what they actually, so they're not actually saying that, are they? They're saying, what are they saying? Yeah, they're saying setting new nav target, in which case they send the target there, and then we're just sending engage FTL. So what is preventing that? Yes, we got a conversion thing. Oh, hang on a minute. Is it because we're not on the ship? So when we send that, if memory serves, it's being processed here somewhere. Should be a bridge commands helm somewhere. Where are we? Easier way of finding it. It's going to be that one, I expect. So we're sending... Oh, no, not that one. We're sending helm engage FTL. Right, okay, so that's going to be picked up by this panel. And we'll process those somewhere. Would that be on the blueprint? No, that's not that. Where's our reference viewer gone? There. So it is this one. Okay. I'm just missing. Oh, no, there it is. Right. So bridge commands helm. Make sure we've got the right payload. So radio menu payload. Yeah. Okay. So helm engage FTL. Command FTL. Yeah, just check ship states, and to be honest, we can grab that from our macro at some point as well. So all it does, it sends our button press 16, which comes back, which doesn't need to come back actually, because that goes through straight to the ship. So yeah, so for every one that we press, we do helm input pressed on the player controller, and then we send that as helm input, which comes out on the helm as this helm input, and then that's our breakdown that we did there, and it was 16 that we were firing. Again, we're just checking the ship state. Yeah, so none of those steps required the presence of the player. So it's actually very strange that that did what it did. So the update we made to the macro should have fixed that. Right, let's do a quick tab purge, because we've reached that tipping point where there's too many. Right, so we've got our game state, our flyable ship. Don't need that one. We do need that one. Don't need that. Do need that. And that. That. And that. Okay. Right, so let's try and grab a debug. So that should fire every time this fires. And that's engaging autopilot. Make that one linger a bit longer. And that's the FTL. Also make that one linger longer. Right, so we'll see what they actually say so we can see what's not happening. Okay, so I'll wait for them to do their long range survey. So once the long range survey is complete, they give that to the captain. Captain tells them to explore it. And then we should have a helm action after that. So we'll see what the log actually says on that one. Okay, setting nav target, engaging autopilot. Oh, and it went. Ah. Interesting. Interesting thing about that is I don't think I actually did anything to fix it. I don't recall changing something specific that would have fixed that beyond adding some debugs. Let's just try that again. I'm going to face that way so we can see it disappear off. Yeah, well, I'll claim credit for fixing something that I didn't fix, yeah. Do you mean the Bar is You game? Yes, I would have played it all night if Claire hadn't told me she wanted to go to bed. It's actually really good fun. I was saying it's one of those stupid games where, like, it's obviously a very small indie project, you know, minimal graphics, but hugely fun and hugely challenging on the brain. And I don't know how long it took them to make, but then I look at what we're doing and I think, oh, it really makes me question my life. Like, how can something so small and so fun, and then like you've got something like this, which is like massively complicated and loads of effort. I should have just made a tiny little indie game. Right, let's see whether the ship zooms off. Oh, yeah, there it went. We definitely saw it zoom off, so that's good. So the fascinating thing, like next, with the whole shuttle thing, is if we were to add FTL capability to the shuttle, we should be able to target the same planet and warp over there and arrive at least near the Caravella, so that we can chase it around the star system. But as of now, the shuttle doesn't have any controls, so we can't do that. But yeah, it's weird. Oh, of course. So yeah, the audio and the effect and everything are obviously waiting for me to get there. Right. And we managed to fix it before midnight, so yay. So what have we achieved? So the Caravella is now completely flyable. It loads, it flies, the bridge crew works. You should be able to do everything on the ship that you can do on the Magellan, at least to a point, aside from the refueling stuff, which I haven't added yet. But the rest of it should be fine. What else? yeah, the proxies are all set up. They're spawning properly. Yeah, and we can see the ship zoom off into the distance when the NPCs pilot it, so that's good. Yeah, I think we've pretty much ticked all the boxes we wanted to tick tonight, so that is progress for sure. So I will continue to just polish this and make sure it's not causing any issues with the Magellan. And then anyone who is an Admiral level backer will have access to a flyable Caravella class. Even though it's barely a tenth of what it should be right now, because it's very much unfinished, but at least you can get a feel for it, if nothing else. Okay, well, on that happy note, I shall leave it there. Thank you once again, everyone, for watching. It's always good to have you on board. And yeah, we shall do more of the same soon. So next stream is on Wednesday, and I'm not sure what we're doing on Wednesday yet. We'll have to see what the next 2 days bring, but it'll be something fun, I'm sure. Right, have a good one, everyone. Have a great week ahead, and I shall see you on Wednesday. Bye for now.